G'day, you're listening to the Big Breakdown podcast with Kris, Stafford and Harrison Marshall. Take it away, fellas.
Hello and welcome along to season 3 of the Big Breakdown podcast, where in this season we are looking at coaching skills, and today we are looking at learner engagement. I think out of all of the guests we've had on so far, I think I'm looking forward to this one today around learner engagement. I think it's such an important area across the whole coaching piece. Harrison, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. We've had, I think the main kind of takeaway from seasons 1 and 2 is understanding your who. Now we understand our who. Now how can we keep them engaged? How can we keep these our players interested in learning? And that's a challenge I think we've all struggled with as coaches on our coaching journeys. And I know that the guests that we've got coming on in this episode, both you and I have already taken a lot from what you said, previously, and I can't wait to actually hear more about what we can be doing.
So today we are joined by Mark Bennett MBE. Mark is a former British commando and senior instructor within the Army Physical Training Corps. During his 22 years military career, Mark was a senior instructor running the Commando Training Wing. Since leaving the armed forces, Mark works as a consultant, trainer, mentor and coach to various corporations, professional and national sporting organisations, teams and universities around the world, as well as schools and community sports. His aim is to help transform the leadership capabilities of every manager, coach and teacher that he comes in contact with. Put it simply, Mark makes people better influencers. Over the last 3 decades, Mark has worked with over 30 sports at all levels and age grades, from grassroots to professional and international teams. He has also supported national sporting organisations and global businesses to embed robust cultures and improve wellness, productivity and performances. Mark had the honour of being awarded an MBE by Her Majesty the Queen in 2006 for his work in developing his systems. And today Mark joins us to chat about learner engagement. Mark, how are you?
Awesome, thank you. Productive month. Big change around for me from the initial lockdown, where it was a big lost all my business within 10 days. So just adapted, changed and developed. So I'm back up to fully loaded up now, full in demand. So follow the principles you share.
Yeah, no, it's exactly. It's good to hear that you're back being busy. Just if I assume you just moved everything more online, or you operate? You've got quite a big network anyway.
Yeah, because I work globally. Obviously, the States work the live stuff shut down within 10 days. Literally, I flew back on the Friday from the States working the Major League Baseball team, and by the Monday, all my work was cancelled. So I diversified into the corporate sector, which I was turning down a lot of, but again, it works very powerful there. So that kept my business up, and then just pushing a little bit more online. But now obviously the sports have opened up again, so I'm doing live stuff again, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, I heard you speak at the UK Coaching Conference in 2019 at Loughborough University.
Oh, okay.
And I think a lot of the stuff we were talking about today that we're going to look at today around behaviours was quite sort of a focus point of that as well. So obviously we've asked you to sort of come on today. We're looking at sort of coaching skills throughout the whole of this season. And one of the things that we, as coaches, we need to probably have at the forefront of everything that we do is learner engagement.
Yeah.
A variety of different ways that we can do that, but it's probably something that when you go to sort of coach ed, it's very much focused down that technical and tactical route, but actually it probably starts well before that.
Yeah. I think this is a catch-22 because I'm generalizing here, so let's do a lot of generalizing on this. Is traditional coaching courses is high tech loaded, and although there are slides and there's discussions on engagement on the emotional intelligence area, however they want to frame it, and developing the decision making, all this stuff, actually in applicational tools and actually helping people have a go with that and reflect on it on early coaching courses, indeed most courses, is really in balance with the technical and tactical. So you end up with coaches that are doing the very best they can with minimal resources, especially at grassroots, but they struggle sometimes. So it's a bit of a catch-22 where actually they want players engaged, they want players thinking more, but they end up often with going, well, I ask a question and I just get blank faces, or I get the same 1 or 2 players answering, And often they're answering, what does coach want to hear? And then he goes, well, if it's blank, I just need to tell them again. And it's how to break that cycle of understanding whatever age group you're working with, they're going to have inbuilt habits or expectations of what environment looks like and what the coach says, the engagement with the players. So sometimes it's just understanding, how can I get them to explicitly understand the value of them thinking more, get them to take their focus away from just results and outcomes, and get them to really understand, actually, I'm here to help you grow, and how I can do that is better understand what you're thinking, what you're seeing, and take away the fear of decision making. That's kind of the fundamentals I think is missing in a lot of coaching courses, the how to, if you like.
Have you have you got so with that, have you got any kind of, quite a broad question, any quick fire examples that we can, us as coaches, can fire away just to get the learners engaged?
Yeah, I mean, there's like so much there. So yes, I have lots. So if we start off simple, and I think sometimes the fashion, if we call it that, of what's the best way to coach limits a lot of players. So obviously we've got the ecological approach now, which is causing a little bit of conflict, if you like. And then obviously the non-linear pedagogy, and then we've got coaches go, no, you can't get players to think like that, you still need to do drills. And there's a bit of not understanding, actually what we should be doing is actually an inclusive approach, and understand actually they all have their place if we understand the value. So my best starter, although there's tons here, but let's just throw starter, is I set up this, what I call a baseline game. So if we looked at it in rugby, football, hockey, netball, basketball, etc., all you do is you'd give each team a board each, and you say to them, and you put them at the end or opposite of the center line, and you say, okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to play a game, but here's your challenge. We're going to have, and if they don't know each other, you can have numbered bibs, but if they know the names, great. And on their boards, they're going to have the name or the bid numbers of the opposition. And you say, right, we're going to play for 2-3 minutes. I'm not going to say anything. I just want you to play, but here's your challenge. As you're playing, I want you to see if you identify the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition. We'll play for 2 or 3 minutes, whatever you've decided. And then what you say is you're going to have 60 seconds to sprint back onto the board and write down what you're picking up, what they're doing particularly well, where you think their weaknesses are, and then a strategy, very simple, just pick one thing that you say, okay, let's commit to this. And then as soon as that minute going, whatever you say, we're going to go again for another 2 minutes, and we'll do 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of that based on judgment where you go, generally 4 to 6 sets. And you just let them at it. So what you generally find is when you take yourself away from that and you've got to focus on, we're not talking technical and tactical. We're not talking who's best, who's worst. We're looking at, I'm putting a focus on, now I've got to look at the opposition. And actually the first time they go to the board, you generally get 1 or 2 of the dominant players putting things up, and that minute may disappear and I've got hardly anything on the board. And all you're doing as a coach is you're scanning for who's talking, who's not. What are they saying? Have they picked up what you've picked up? And they go out again. And that's why that minute on the board is really important, because they can't waffle and they'll realize, oh my God, we're back in the game again. And then you go next time and all of a sudden you'll start to see they're starting to put more, instead of talking about loads of things, they start narrowing it down because they realize now there's a short amount of time. And you just let them go. There are some variables in this. So an example would be as a variable. You can, and this is all judgment, you can spot there may be 2 or 3 players from each of the groups that are dominating the conversation. So all you do is, as soon as they break out again, you just a little whisper in the ear at any opportunity for those 1 or 2 players. It says, love what you're doing there. Can you help me include the other players? So your challenge is next time you come in, as opposed to you giving the answers, can you ask them what they think? And can you manage the board that way? Here's your challenge, accept, fist punch, off you go. So what you're then doing then is you're developing the interpersonal skills. The coach is still out of it. The coach is still not talking, not asking questions. Literally, you're just observing. And what you'll start to see within a short period of time is the quality of the dialogue and the engagement will start to go through the roof. Now, some of them may experience that before, but often we're going to get players that haven't experienced, hang on, coach isn't shouting and telling me a solution. Coach isn't dominating the chats now, it's us. And actually now you've influence the more dominant players to actually influence the other players of starting to ask questions of other players, which is everything we want as part of that interpersonal skills. So as we go, what you can do, another variable, is you can start to shorten that time down. So I've done it with teams where we've got down to 10 seconds on the board, and they're like, back in, bang, it's one thing. Oh, what do we got to get to? But what they'll start to realize is they'll begin with talking about everything. Then they'll start realizing, my God, time's run out. And then they'll start going, hang on a minute. What's our one thing? Let's just pick one thing. Let's do it. And that's the start base. Then once I've had that experience, you bring them in, and again, these are variables, it's judgment. What you can do is say, okay, individually, you can say, share what you picked up within the strengths of the opposition, with not generalizing on a name. And you can share that. If you feel they're more comfortable with it in the environment, you can say, okay, can share what you're picking up within the players, within the strengths, weaknesses, and what strategy did you come up. You can also do it where you say, I'm just sharing variables now, where you say, instead of them sharing what they've noticed in the team, you ask the team, what do you think they noticed in you? Did you spot any changes they made between the breaks? And then you'll see, oh yeah, I noticed they started to doing this. And what we're asking them then is, when you notice they changed, did you recognize that you needed to change? And if they go yes, you go, okay, did you? And they might say no. So, well, hey, here's the thing, I'm giving you permission. If you recognize you need to change, just commit to it. Don't really matter, it doesn't come off. So these are lots of variables you can do. And there's probably another 9, 10 of them, to be honest. But what we're doing there is, the big thing once they've shared is, we ask the big question is, how did you find that? And every single time I've done this says, oh my God, enjoyed it so much. My brain was working so harder. The intensity was through the roof and the communication was so much better. And for me, that's your starter. So then you say, okay, so how would you feel if this way we ran practice sessions was a lot more like this, and a lot less standing around for a lot of time or just doing lots of drills? So how about if we started practice with this after a warm-up? And then between us, we spot one thing that we go, if we could pick this one thing that could improve the most, what would it be? And we worked on that. So then we can agree our success criteria. We start using the terminology. And now what we're doing is we're involving them in the decision-making of what's the one thing that's going to give us the biggest impact within every session. So that builds a non-linear approach, if you like. If we're saying, look, let's start with the game, so they're not getting bored standing around listening to coach after a warm-up. They're in the game, they're engaged, they're thinking, they're connecting, and then they're involved in the dialogue. Okay, what's the one thing? And then we go, so what would success look like for that? We then introduce the UAEs. So what would unacceptable and exceptional look like for us? So we've got a marker. And then we can start using that. Okay, let's see if we can fix it live. Then we might say, I'm going to give you now, if you can't fix it live, I'm going to give you a 10-second timeout that you guys can call. So if you can't fix it live, you call your timeout, and it's 10, 9, 8. It's not start when you come in. And that will, again, help them get to one point, then they go out again. And we say, if you can't fix it, even with the 10 seconds, you can call coach and go, coach, we need help. Or I might decide, okay, let's stop there. Let's review that. We might go into a breakout, which may be 2-3 minutes, where we can work on something. And then you let me know when you go, coach, we're ready. Can we put it back into the game? So you can see already by a simple framework, even if you don't know any psychology or anything advanced coaching, that's a really good way to start shifting the expectations and getting everyone inclusively involved in a dialogue that is based on them, but it's more a game-led approach, but it's not game-led as in just let them play. There's real meaning. We're increasing the scanning, the decision-making, the interaction between the players. That's my short one. How was that for you?
That was brilliant. It's I think it's a really kind of clever, smart way of it was almost shifting the balance of power. I think a lot of coaches, when especially new coaches, when they come in and maybe a little bit unsure, they tend to be a little bit dictatorial. And actually, players these days and all age groups, no matter what you're working in, have got the creative solutions. And actually, sometimes there's those introverts that probably aren't as dominant. But I've never, it's not like blown my mind a little bit there in terms of how can we empower the probably more dominant and actually set them the challenge of getting the best out of the rest. if there is one kind of player that's really kind of struggling to get his voice across, if you've got what kind of things can we be doing to?
Yeah, so I'm going to use some of my little PDS terminology. So I call ninjas people that are influencers. So they could be negative influences or positive influences, but they're highly motivated. They want success, but sometimes they might get frustrated with other players that don't commit in the same way as they are. So those are the people that I'd spot as early as I can. I do this with master classes everywhere I go, and I'm looking for the ninjas. And what I do then is I do some ninja mastery, I call it. So I start influencing the ninjas, and it might be a little sideline, might be a little chat. So one of the things we do with those ninjas is we recognize, okay, so we notice now Billy's really quiet. Your mission is to get Billy involved in the conversation. So instead of when we come into the huddle, can you stand next to Billy and ask Billy what Billy thinks? So, but actually when he picks something up, actually give that real positive enforcement. Can you do that for me? So notice there's some little things going on there. One is we're recognizing the rule of three. I don't know if you've heard me talk about that, but the rule of three is a way of structuring a coach when they're stepping and when not, but make it explicit with the players. So one is you pursuing your own excellence, being the best you can with what you have in the present. What does that look like? So it's not an ability thing. Anyone can do that, from a novice to an elite athlete. Rule of two is then helping everyone be the best they can be. What does that look like? And then we can go to the picture and what it looked like and sound. Rule of three is coach steps in. So what we're saying is the aim is not to get to coach, not to get to three. So we can see with the ninja, what we're doing now is we're saying, how can you be effective at rule of two? How can you help other players be the best they can be? What does that look like? And because we're framing it that way, it becomes non-confrontational, where it's from a peer to a peer, as opposed to the coach attempting to do it. So those quieter players are far more likely to open up, where sometimes an adult or a coach, there's a bit more fear of, what if I say something wrong? What does coach want to hear right now? All the stuff that we're going into. So there's lots of other ways we do it, but that's my simple go-to. Identify the ninjas, give them those little extra responsibilities, but notice there's some little subtleties there. And I suppose saying just go in the huddle, I've asked them to stand next to the quiet person. So they're not facing with the eyeball of, hang on, I'm going to challenge you now. I'm at the side, I'm supporting them. What do you think? Whisper in the ear. The other thing I can do is, if I notice those quiet players, I always teach the rule of three is always explicit. We always link in a success criteria that's always explicit. And what we also do is I always teach them what I call the action review process. And these things together, fundamentally, I work with elite sports and grassroots exactly the same. It's this everything builds from. And the action review process is just a way to increase decision making within a player, but also it helps a coach have a very effective common language framework to allow them to question a player or to get a review from a player. And it also allows a coach to identify the source of an issue. So I'll just go through them very quickly, but there's loads to them how they pop off. So in essence, as we start with, this is where it links to the rule of three. Excellence is being the best you can with what you have in the moment. So what we're saying there is you have to be present. What's the ideal you? So am I present? Now, one of the things that can help you be present is scanning. So the first part of the action review is scanning. Scanning is looking and seeing, collating the data, opportunities, threats, where's there space. So on or off the ball, we're doing that all the time. The next option is identifying all the options. So we've done the scanning. What we're looking for is all the options, even the ones you can't do yet. And this is important. We're future-proofing, because if we say just look for the options you can do, what we're doing is then we're limiting their learning of the game, because what we're saying is just I can only do this one, so I'm only going to look for this one. So now they're not actually scanning, they're just going, when's that one thing I can do? So what we do is we go look for all the options, and then the basic one early on is pick the best one that you're capable of doing. If it's in a performance situation, if we're in a learning situation, and this is part of the explicitness, so learning is we're going to have a go at things you can't yet do. Now we explicitly say to them, you may have 10 minutes of learning, you may have a whole session of learning. So what we're saying is, okay, now we're in learning. So out the options, I can pick something and commit to something I can't yet do, because my success is, committing with intent to a choice I can't yet do, not the outcome. If it was performance, I'm now committed to something that I can do. What's the best option here based on my ability? So that's the fundamentals. Then what we look at is, did you commit? So the first question is, if I didn't commit, I haven't earned the right to review. The first rule is commit. If you don't commit, the answer is you haven't committed. So your conclusion is commit next time. If we commit, then all we're asking them to do is look at how was the choice, how was the execution, separately, not together. So we're not looking at outcome, we're splitting them up. So what happens then is it gives players a nice little framework to go, okay, that's what you're asking me to do. I can do that. Great. So then when they come in, linking back to your question, Harrison, I know this is a long way to get round. So what I do with the quiet ones, I do this hot one-to-one where I just rotate players out or pull a player out in live action if we looked at football, hockey, rugby, basketball, etc. And I'd just be using that framework that I explicitly taught everyone so they know when you come in now, you know the questions are going to be asking you. Okay, what did you see? Because I've already scanned if their state's okay. If their state's not okay, my go-to is what's my intervention to help their state. So state's okay. Harrison, you're now a young, quiet player, Harrison, okay? Harrison, over here, and so Harrison runs in. Okay, Harrison, talk to me what happened over there. What did you see? Harrison's going, oh, I saw this. Go, great. So what were your options? These. And what did you go for? I went for this one. Did you commit? Great. Would you change anything? Now, often, initially, they'll look for, coaches asked me a question. I must have done something wrong. So should I, oh my God, did I pick the wrong choice? But we build them up and says, no, if you think it's the right choice, say, I think it's the right choice, and go, I absolutely agree. So now bang, fist punch back in. So that's now giving them some confidence. Now we go to the next process is we can have one of them on the sideline and we go, come in, Harrison. And I'm asking you, what are you seeing over there, Harrison? Based on the action review, going, okay, I'm seeing this. Okay, what about the options they're taking now? And now we've built that basics of the game management. We're saying, well, I think they're getting caught out because they're losing their width, coach. Love that. I'm going to call a timeout now, Harrison. Can you share that with him? Because that's fantastic information. You ready? Yes. Timeout over here, back on me. They sprint in. Harrison's got something to share with you guys. Harrison, off you go. And then Harrison goes the width. And now we've got also on the rule of three is what I call the 3 A's. So the 3 A's is if someone reaches out to you, you have to internally accept, physically acknowledge, that's a thumb up or a verbal or a fist punch if you're close enough, and then act on it. So this is a principle of the rule of two when we're reaching out. Even if you're not in the mood or the state or you don't like someone or you don't know them, you still have to follow the 3 A's. So what we're doing there is Harrison now knows he's right because he's had reinforcement for me. I've just told him that's fantastic. They're called in. Now they're all listening to Harrison following the principle of the rule of three. And then they go, great, Harrison, bang. And okay, so what are you going to do? Bang, can you show me? Great, push them out. And then Harrison can either stay and look or he can go in with them. So there's just two of many examples of how you can take a quiet player with a lack of confidence. And all of a sudden now they're going, oh, wow. I know how to review. I know how to make decisions. I'm doing okay. I'm committing to it. There's not about outcome. It's not about comparing. And now I'm seeing the game well. My God, and coach, I'm speaking to my players and they're listening to me in a very simple framework. So does that answer your question, Harrison, in a roundabout kind of way?
Yeah. Oh, it's more than answers it. I think layering on some great examples there. I think it's always a challenge, and I think for us coaches it can be quite daunting sometimes. And but like these are cracking examples I think that lots of us can learn from and go and implement. It's about us as coaches being brave with it as well. And sometimes it might not work every time, but if you stick with the process and the players buy in, and you're trying it with a player, they'll buy in, and that trust will develop between the
and there's some key points you brought out there. Is one, you need to be patient, relentless. So, and the two together important, not just one. So it may be the first time you do it with a player, they're just looking at you blank. So you don't ask them 300 questions and it's like that dead space. You just go, no problem, back in. I'm going to ask next time. So now they're going, oh, I need to scan now because coach going to pull me in again next time. Okay, so what do you say? All of a sudden they're giving you some information. So it's that, don't waste time on it, bang, if you go. Now, the other thing we can add is you can do the same using your ninjas or any other player to hot one-to-one another player that's not even you. So you know that thing where I pull someone to the side and I'm doing, what are you seeing? We get other players to do that with other players. So now we're getting that peer connection, and then we start to do it live. So what we're saying is then live, when there's a break in play, you can start doing that with each other. And then we're looking for the 3As. I'm just scanning, bang, may not even be able to hear it. There's been a discussion now. I've seen the 3As. I'm looking for an action change. Have I seen it? Yes. Have I seen it? No. So then what I might do is either one-to-one the player that's spoken to the other player, talk to me what happened over there, or speak to the player that I didn't see the action based on the action review, hot one-to-one. So the framework's very simple because nothing really changes. The action review can be used all over the place. It's a common language. They're not now running up to you thinking, what is coach going to ask? They know what the questions are going to be. And it helps them to think. We've got the 3As, so now we're helping them that interpersonal of accepting and acting on feedback. And we've got that rule of 3 where we're saying, well, 1 is being the best you can with what you have. 2 is helping everyone else be the best they can be. What would that look like now? Then you've got agreeing what success is just the one thing. You've got the UAEs that frame around that so they know what it looks like, not just wishy-washy. And then you've got learning performance competition, which we explicitly say, guys, this is a learning phase. What does that mean? We can't do it yet, coach. It's all about the commitment and the choice. Great. We're in performance now. What does that look like? Well, we can do it now. We just got to show it in live play. Fantastic. Competition is, which sometimes you wouldn't use this with the more novice or younger teams. Competition is, we're going to really put pressure on you to see if I can catch you out. So that's where we split the teams up and we say, right, what's the strengths, weaknesses, mentally, skill level in these players, right? Go at them. Give them wrong ref calls, really put pressure on them. What we're looking for is the success in the performance phase where they're making great choices, committing, communicating, scanning. Does any of that regress when we start to increase the pressure? If it does, then we can start doing loads of little interventions, either live one-to-ones, or we're recognizing there's a trend. They can call a 10-second timeout, or we can give them permission for a 30-second timeout, or we go, actually, come in, guys. Okay, so review. And they're saying, right, this is breaking down, coach. We've attempted to fix it live. We can't. Okay, what do you think is preventing us now from being successful? What do you think we need to do? And we may be going there where they say, we're not ready for competition yet, or we just need a little breakout on this. Give us a couple of minutes. Can you give us a minute, coach? Yeah, no problem. Off you go. Let's go back in again. So you can shift then straight into performance or straight into learning. But what it does, it allows the players to understand, I know what we're doing now. I know the expectations now. There's no gray area. And then all we do is when we're reviewing, we make sure they review against the success criteria that we've pre-agreed, not against everything. So we don't have players talking about 10, 15 things. We know, hang on, remind me what we agreed, just review that.
I suppose this is all going to, when they get into the actual game, they can review and reflect and do all that one-to-one where the coach is on the sideline and not actually involved. This is a break in play for a scrum. You can get in and they can hot review themselves.
100%.
Which is then going to help if they get into that process of being able to do it, from how they can work out weaknesses of opposition. Because I find it now with some of the players that I'm coaching, even when you go on at half time and that they expect the information from you, then when you try using questions, you just end up getting them blank faces because they just want you to tell them everything.
100%. And this is the key. All of this is about to make yourself redundant. And that's always been my big thing with a coach. Your aim is to make yourself redundant. Now, clearly, you're not going to do that because there's new skills, there's new adaptations. But actually, in that element, I don't want them to rely on me. I want them in live play to be able to make great decisions, review them. If it's exceptional, recognize and continue to do it. If it's unacceptable, recognize it and make the change. Not as a singular unit, but the human factor as a team. So what I mean by that is, let me use a different sport to make it easier. So let's take netball. So on netball, there's 7 people on the court. Now, the choice you make can't be something that's on magnets on a board where you go, when this happens, you go there, because there's a human element. So what we've got to get players to recognize, right, I'm now looking, I've got option. Sarah's on, Sarah's fast acceleration, that option's on, open space. Sarah's not on, Julie's on. Julie's tired, Julie is not as fast acceleration. That option's not on, this is a better option, short pass to the left. That's a human factor, which I call the variables, which, you know, when we went the action review process, where we got to the beginner start is, what are you seeing? Options. Once they build past options, you're looking at variables, influences, whichever word you want to use. And the influences are the environment. The wind might be outside for rugby, for kicking example, maybe the strengths or weaknesses of the opposition. We've got a back that's a fast sprinter. I can't kick into that space. Their opposition back now is knackered, is down on his knee, right, that kick over into space, the human factor. Who's on my team around me? Great example in rugby is George Ford. I'd say he's one of the greatest components in modern, where actually if you watch him, he'll change his choice based on the ability of the people around him, because he'll read them. He go, I could do this, but actually this guy's not skilled enough, or he can't read me and anticipate to do that, so I'm going to do this. This guy's now knackered or he's out of position, I'm going to do this. And that's the variable element, which is the next level in effective decision making. So it's all about how can we make myself redundant? How can we get them to adapt live? The next element is how can they act on words? So this is now, if we say something, can they do it? Now, there's two reasons why this is important, and not just adapt live. There will be times in a match when they can't fix it and they need some information from the coach. So if they're not used to acting on words, now remember, when we say something, we've got to make sure they're capable of doing it at that level of stress and pressure, then they're not going to be very good at that. The other thing is, if we want them to adapt live, if someone's telling them something, one, we need to make sure you're telling that player something they're capable of doing, not just do this because we've worked on it in practice. You've never been able to do it in practice. Well, I'm asking you to do that. That shouldn't be. But then if someone's telling you, you've got to be able to act on those words. So one of the problems in modern sport, because it becomes so much faster and fitter, is people aren't making the connection with. It's not about identifying something's going wrong live in a game. It's identifying what's the source of that going wrong and what's the fix. So we get a lot of players going, oh no, we're losing width here. Yeah, but why are we losing width? What's the source of the losing the width? Because if we don't know that, we can't put the strategy in. Then if we know the strategy ourselves, have we agreed the words or the actions that when everyone hears that, they'll be able to act on it, the ripple. And this is the bit, again, that is lost with a lot of coaches and athletes. So they don't realize, yeah, your players are really good at video analysis. After a match, they can tell you exactly what they went wrong. So my question is, when did you recognize it? Oh, straight away, coach. Well, why didn't you do something about it? Oh, well, we're not sure how to do the solution. Okay, well, that's something we need to work on. So it goes back, Kris, yes, definitely about the adapting live. There still has to be that success of, can you act on the words, but also building players and coaches. We should never ask a player to do something we haven't seen them consistently do in a competition phase of practice, because we're setting themselves up for failure. Unless you say success for this game is, we're going to commit to things we haven't yet done in a match. That's fine. But often that doesn't happen. Often coaches will put players out of position. They're drawing things on board and asking them to do that they may have done in early learning and practice, but they've never done under pressure in competition. We're setting them up for failure. And also some players get frustrated because they're asking a player to do something and they're not doing it. They're not realizing that player is incapable of doing that. So why am I getting wound up? Why am I even asking them to do it? I've got to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the teammates in practice and not just play computer games on tactical decisions, if that makes sense.
And that brings an importance from, I suppose, as a coach, to know all of your athletes as well and know what makes them tick, because you need to, like I say, you need to know their strengths and weaknesses, but you need to also know them when you're identifying your ninjas. You need to really know, well, actually, I know that Mark's got this personality trait that would help influence this. I need to make them that leader. Yeah, especially from a talent development perspective, is that coaches within the grassroots is working with youth sport. You're not just there to develop them as a sports player. You're there to develop life skills that they can then go and utilize later on in life as well. And all of these will build their connection with other people, how they communicate with others, and that's going to set them up for life as well as just as sports people. Yeah,
and I think going a step further to what you're saying there is the other critical element is understanding, and this is for coach and for players to players, is understanding those ninjas, those leaders, whatever we call them, they have meltdowns, they struggle at times. So we've got to understand, let's take away the hierarchical level within this team. we've got to be scanning those other players, even the senior ones. And if they're struggling, we need to reach out and have a positive impact to them. And then importantly, we need to understand not just their skill and ability, we need to understand when Jimmy's heads start going down, when Jimmy starts to get frustrated or angry, what can I say to Jimmy and how can I say it to have an effective impact? Steve's head's now going down or getting frustrated or angry. What can I say to Steve that I know is effective? And this is another reason why that competition phase in practice is important, because it's an opportunity to put players under pressure, to get other players to figure out, what do I need to say? How do I say it to have an effective impact when things aren't going well? So I always say when things aren't going well, it's an opportunity, and we need those opportunities in practice because that's the only time we can see it as an opportunity for growth, to allow us to be better at influencing others in a game.
If it was like a training cycle, for example, Matt, would you start, if it was something new, start the early and build up to that competitive phase?
I'd always start with the baseline. So yeah, so I always start with the game. Let's see what they can figure out within 2-3 minutes, and don't need it long. And then from that, we can identify together of, okay, so what's preventing us from being successful? What are the key things? And then agree, decide. So what you might find, I've seen this so often, the coach going, Mark, they can't do that yet. And you say, well, how have you given them the skills to problem solve? How do you know? So what the coach does goes, well, just for safety, I'm going to go straight into this drill and build it up. But they haven't actually seen what they're capable of doing. And when we do it, when we give them some basic skills and we go, let's go into the game and see, within 15 minutes, the players have sussed it out. So then we can go, well, let's build the pressure so we can go into competition. So that baseline, if we think about it, generally we start in the performance, but you might say, actually for this team, let's start in a competition as baseline and drop back into performance. That's a judgment based on where they are. But for me, my go-to is always, let's start in the game. Let's facilitate the issues, the problems, the challenges. Let's see if they can figure out. If they can't, we might just, like a little 30-second coach-led timeout and go, okay, what are you spotting? So what about this? Okay, show me, because that's something they didn't recognize they can do. And all of a sudden they start to grow with it. And then it may be, actually, coach, no, we need a bit more time to go through this element, right? Can you do that yourselves, or do you need me to give you a hand? And then you might drop into learning for 5-10 minutes. Might be 15 minutes, might be 40 minutes. But what we're saying is, let me know when you're ready and we can shift back into performance. So instead of doing this bang, 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 what we're saying is, let's see where we are. Can we manipulate it and adjust? No, we can't. Do we need a breakout? That's basically what I call them. What is that breakout? Which could be a regression, a walkthrough. It could be a variable of putting some constraints in or going half pitch, whatever it may be. Okay, now we're there. Can we shift back in? And that's that dialogue between each other. So it's very much about, start with the baseline. Can we fix live? If we can't, then we start shifting those little interventions in.
I think that's definitely where I know I'm probably being guilty of sometimes. Well, as you go straight to that competitive phase and you go, well, we can do it under pressure and try and do it. Actually, especially if it's something new, you do need to sometimes strip it back in a safe way to build them up. And that's whatever level you're at. Even the top performers need to take that time to digest and observe and react to the new changes that you want to bring in. And that's going to then have a positive impact on that competition phase. I suppose the key thing for a lot of this from a coach aspect is your ability with your observation. You know to look for, because we always, if you're then doing in that competitive or you took it back and it's failing, you then feel as though you need to do more. But I suppose a lot of it stems down to having one, knowing what you're looking for and being confident in that, but then also having belief in the system that you've got to allow the problem solving to grow for them to actually embed it, learn it, and execute it under pressure.
Yeah, and it does link back to that. Another thing I haven't mentioned is the player first, player last, which may link back to what we're talking about there. Is the player first, player last is a way of dialogue. So what we want to know is, before me sharing information, I want the player to go first. So now we've got that action review process, they can start connecting to it. So from that data, I might then step in with some challenges, some questions. What do you mean by that? What if this happens? Have we thought about that? And then player last is, they go last. So what have we agreed? What are you going to do? And then they tell us and we just go, show me. So sometimes it's connecting with when we're having a dialogue, in order to do that effectively, I need to be able to scan well, because my data capture will influence how I respond to what that player is sharing with me. So what I've seen with a player, now the players come in and they use an action review process to reflect. I'm now going through that. So the first element is if their state's fine, I'm listening to, right, they're now sharing what they saw and heard. And now I'm spotting, they saw something totally different than me. So did I miss something or did they? Bearing in mind, we've got to be understanding that they're stood in a different place. So their vision maybe, but if there's certainly something missed, we've got to help go, well, the source of the issue is their scanning. Let's put interventions to develop their scanning. But the problem is, if we're scanning poor, and I'd say over the decades I've been doing this, that is my big standout with coaches I work with. The common thing is they say to me, Mark, my brain is fried. I'm realizing how little I was scanning before. I was just following the ball. And what we're saying here is that principle of performance is a behavior, not an outcome. What we've got to do is scan behaviors first. We've got to be looking, are people present? Are they scanning? Are they committing to the choices they're making? Because if that's not in place, then actually the tech-tac conversation isn't the answer, because the issue is in the fundamentals of the behavior. So if we're not scanning for it, we can start going, well, the tactic is wrong. We start talking tactics, but the reason the tactic's wrong is actually in the scanning, the state, or the game management of the decision making. They didn't even see the options. They're not recognizing that's a game management issue, or actually the scanning's so poor, they're not even spotting the options. So however much tech tac we're going to do with them, they can nod all they like. In a drill, they will do it fantastically. And you go, look, they can do it brilliant. But the problem is, if their scanning's poor, they're not going to spot the choice to make the right choice. So I think it's, for me, fundamentally, players managing and coaches being aware of managing their state, number one. Number two is their ability to scan. I think these two are the underdeveloped areas as a practitioner approach, not as a psychologist one-to-one sideline, as a practitioner approach, to put explicit focus on that in practice, to develop those elements, because they will hinder everything after that. And I don't think we put enough time and investment in supporting coaches to understand how to develop that, but also supporting coaches where they realize, I'm okay with you putting that as a success criteria for a session, effective scanning. Let's put that success criteria. I mean, how many times have we heard that? It's rare, right? We've got to cover some tech tac.
But then also, I think that also helps the kind of player understand, their strengths and weaknesses that they bring to the game, right? Yeah. If you talk to them around the effective scanning, and they come back and they actually scan relatively well, but they've got an understanding of, right, but the reason why I didn't commit to that choice was because I know that I'm technically quite poor off my left hand, or my left foot in football is not quite strong enough. Now that's right. That's when in those hot minutes you can then almost go into pull them out and do a quick breakout, a quick a skill zone, I think the RFE likes to call it. And that's how we can that's how you can work on it. But that's coming from them almost action reviewing their own stuff, and you're kind of assisting with that.
Yes, there's a few elements there, Harrison. So the first element is it a fear thing, not a competency thing? I.e., they can do it in a drill, but they've never wanted to do it in a game because they're so focused on outcome. So actually they're hindering a bit of limiting beliefs in their own commitment to it. So actually we've got to establish that first. So it may be then let's go into a learning phase where they go, we're just committing to choices we can't yet do. Now they start saying, oh, actually I'm doing this regularly now, and action review them so they're reflecting and confirming that. Then we can shift them into performance. They're more likely to do it. If it's something that is a quick fix, then fine, we can shift their individual focus to that. So now we're putting a constraint on them. We go, okay, so no right foot, all on left foot, or no stopping the ball if it's football and then kick in. It's a one kick without a pause. We can put that as a personal challenge, but often we're spotting something that can't be fixed in a moment. So we just park that and we go, no problem. And then what we might do is then do an individual work on outside the session, or we may put that into a next session as one of the fundamentals we can build on. And a great example is a lot of basketball, netball with the shooters or somebody else. They say, can you come 20 minutes earlier, or here's something you can do in your own time. So there's lots of ways we can feed around it. So it's important to understand is what's hindering that person from doing it, is it a confidence thing or an ability thing? And then make judgment. Is that something that we could deal with now, or something we can park and give you some support with later on? So you can see now our scanning, our data from the past on where they are, and then actually them believing in themselves and taking away the outcome a lot of the time can help them go, okay, so you're shifting the expectations now. So you're not that bothered where the ball ends up right now. No. The pass now, you actually doing that left pass that you've never done before is success for us right now. So long as you commit to it, we can grow. Because the only way you're going to develop that is do it. And then, but what we've got to do is include all the other players in that. So when I get players to develop individual work-ons, it's normally the one thing that's going to have the biggest impact for them. That doesn't change session to session. That may be 2, 3, 4 months. It's not something we just talk about for a session, which some coaches do. Something we've agreed, something we build on. But all the players need to know that. So often everyone needs to be explicit with it. So before the warm-up, when walking around, we make sure, okay, what's your individual work on, how you're doing with that. Often what we do is we buddy players up. So we go, your success criteria as buddies is to help each other with your work-ons. So they keep hot reviewing each other through the session within the work-on. So it's not something we talk about at the end of the session, which the players forgot about the whole session, then he waffles something or she waffles something. So that's a way of explicitly keeping lots of little work-ons alive without us having to manage it, because we've buddied up on that success criteria and they're hot reviewing each other during the session. So you can see when we start talking about it, there's so many little subtle variables that actually can have a massive impact in the application of developing confidence and competence within individuals and the dynamics of the team.
Yeah.
I suppose
Sorry.
I was going to say, from a rugby context, that's that. If you're getting them to review and reflect one-to-one with each other in that buddy system, because you've got such big squads, like we've got nearly 52 lads training regular with sort of 3 coaches, it takes some pressure off in terms of having to get around everyone, because they've got that buddy to work with. Yeah. Or Miss Harrison.
Yeah, but I think it goes back to what we've kind of discussed previously. It's being honest and open with the players. It reminds me very much of a conversation that Kris and I had on season 2 of the podcast with Richard Smith, who came on and talked about people. And he said, "What we can be honest with them and treat them like silver ferns, feed them sunlight, and say that it's a process, and by the end of it, we'll grow, or we can feed them bullshit and keep them in the dark, and they grow like mushrooms, and that means they're not empowering themselves to go on and learn." So I'm guessing you would agree that like being explicit and being kind of honest and say that it's a process is paramount for all of this to really.
Yeah, what's really important is you spend that time of getting them to understand. Now I call it the lighthouse. Is what are we working towards? If I watch the dream game with us, what would that look, sound, and feel like? So they connect to, we're confident, we're making great choices as a team, we're not allowing the scoreline to impact us, we're communicating, we know how to get the best out of each other, all those elements that we're talking about, and get them. If you ask them to start getting the detail of that, I've never heard anyone say coach is shouting the answers to us on the sideline. So when they don't mention coach, you go, I love what you said there, and you can delve in a bit more. What about this? What about this? To get the detail on it, as if they're watching a movie of themselves. That's the level of detail we want. And then we say, great, you haven't mentioned coach there. So are you saying that you want to be able to do this on your own without coach remind you? And they'll all say, well, yes. So I totally agree with that. So what will be the role of a coach in a match then? And then they'll start connecting. Well, just help us, coach, help us, if we're struggling, or, we're a bit apprehensive and we can't sort it out, but we should be the ones having confidence to make the decisions. So then you go, fantastic. So what does practice need to look like? If we now agree the lighthouse, what does practice need to look like? And now they're going to start saying, we can't keep reminding us, coach. We've got to have time to figure it out ourselves. And now we're cultivating what it looks like. And then we say, can we do it yet? And they go, no, we can't. So how can we do it? Start committing to it. Committing to it in what way? With excellence, coach. What does excellence look like? So what would that look like in this session? Could we have a go with that in this session? Yeah, coach. Well, how about if I shared the baseline game with you? Oh, there we are. We're linked into this thing I said at the very beginning, that they have experience, go, wow, this is fantastic. We were thinking more. But the other thing linked in, Harrison, which is massively critical, is we've got that. So imagine now someone's listened to this. Well, they've been on a training course that I run, or the online course that's coming. And now they go, oh, yeah, I'm into this. I want to change. The first thing they've got to do is when they go to their players, go, look, I've had to listen to this chat, and I've started to think I can be a better coach. And let me share with you why and quantify it. So I'm going to do things I'm not yet good at. I'm going to do things, now we see the value of it, that I can't yet do, but I've got to commit to it. So I'm going to be a bit clunky with it, but I'm going to share with you what my work on is going to be. So an example may be, I'm realizing now, I've listened to this crazy man called Mark, that I talk too much. I'm in coaching session, when we come into the huddles, they're too long and I'm doing all the talking. And even when you give the answer, I have to say something at the end. So my work on is going to be this player first, player last. And what that means is we'll set a time on our timeouts, and it might be a minute, but you go first. And then if I have anything that I'll add, and within the last 30 seconds, it's back over to you guys, and you're going to tell me what you're going to do. That's my work on. And I'll give you permission. If I start talking too long and you already got it, you can say pineapple to me as an example. Other fruits are available. So the kids are like, or adults go, okay, yeah. So now what we're doing is we're showing them, actually, what I'm asking you guys to do, I'm doing it also. What it also does is it prevents the rebound effect, a bit like when people go on New Year's resolutions, go, right, I'm going to change my diet. Trying too much too quick is not sustainable. Everyone looking and go, oh, you're on a diet again. It won't last 3 weeks. You'll be back to normal. It's a bit like that with coaching. You get coaches go around a course, they'll come back, they start changing without explicitly sharing with the players. So the players are like, oh, coach been on a course. Don't worry, it won't last. Give it 2 weeks, he'll be back. And sure enough, it flicks back. So being explicit, getting them to understand, getting them to be involved in it, gets them to go, I see the value of why you're changing, I agree. And they probably knew it anyway. You go, I knew that, coach, just know what I never told you in their heads. But also then what we're saying is when we ask them to focus on a work on, when we're asking them to commit to things they can't yet do, they're going, yeah, you're doing the same, coach. We're in it together. So there's so much comes from that. And I think coaches, I'm generalizing again, but I don't think coaches do a good enough job of that element.
Well, on that, Mark, I mean, obviously you've been sort of leading on this for quite a while now. What's the biggest pushback or restraint you get from coaches as you're trying to sort of, as they're out trying to do it, or is there any stuff that the common?
Yeah, so if we were to be direct, which is the best way, egos. The biggest barrier to this is coaches feeling that they need to be the man of knowledge or the woman of knowledge that actually goes, yeah, I'm a good coach. Or the other one is, I already do this, Mark. And then when you say, okay, are you willing to put a camera on your chest and just do a session as you normally do and then watch it back and let's look at the time notes of how you're doing it? No, not comfortable doing that. Says, okay, so you're saying you want to change, or you're saying actually you're a great coach. Well, I'd be really interested in me understanding how you coach and why. So what's preventing you to put the camera on? And you can have all the excuses under the sun, but the reality is some people just want you to come in and make some tech tack adjustments for them or tell them how good they are. What some coaches don't want you in, to be really honest, and go, actually, the issue isn't the players. The issue is you. So when I say, Mark, I need you to come in, my players are disengaged, they're not committing to this. We're working on this stuff in practice, but they're not transferring to the game. And you watch the practice and the players are not thinking. The coaches tell them exactly what to do, shouting on the sideline, lots of drills. And then they do all these drills. And then at the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes to go into a game, there's no transfer into the game. And then the coach isn't scanning for it. It's all back on coach. And then they wonder why the transferability is not into the match. And it's the coach's fault. So I've had coaches in the past that have brought me in, or their owners brought me in. And when we start to get into it, they really don't want to change. So for me, I can challenge as much as I want. And I get to a point where I go, you're wasting your money here because I can't help you because you don't want the change. And that's fine. I'm happy to walk away from that. But more often than not, and it's become more and more now, maybe because I'm more known and people are listening to the podcast and stuff, when people pull me in, they know what they're going to get. So they're pulling me in and go, actually, this is what I want, Mark. And they understand I can challenge you as much as you want, as I want, 100%. I want you to challenge me. I want you to understand why we're doing these things. And if we agree something, guess what? I'm going to be relentless and patient and hold you accountable and be okay with me holding you accountable. And I think this is the other challenge, Kris, is, and I'm generalizing here, a lot of national mentoring that's around in sports is very much counselor type mentoring. So what I mean by that is we'll sit down, have a cup of coffee. What would you like to talk about? Which is fine. There's real value to that, but there's no adherence to it. So what we're not doing is go, okay, let's first thing is let's build your self-awareness up, your accuracy of you. Film yourself, take time notes, hot review it, cold review it. Let's look at that. Let's identify what you think you're doing and what you are doing. Let's spot the differences. Let's decide on a work on. Let's build on that. When you're going to do it, let's go on the hot reviews after each session. Let's set up a WhatsApp group or Teams, whatever it is. So I'm hearing them live. So then when I come to the next session is the first thing I'm doing is, okay, remind me what you said you were going to commit to. How are you doing with that? Now I'll have the data. No, they haven't. So I can either go, I'm going to now challenge you now in the moment, or we agree I'm not going to, because we've done that already. So when we come to meet again is remind me what we agreed. Okay, review against that. And now you got the uncomfortableness of, oh, I'm not used to someone challenging me. No, I haven't done it. Okay, so why haven't you done it? So I'm intrigued. This isn't a telling off. I'm really intrigued. What's preventing you from committing to the very thing we know you saw the value in? And it may be, well, you know, I'm really busy, or the other coaches haven't bought into it, or, you know, I was under pressure because we needed to win this game. So then we're identifying a source again and we work on it. But I can guarantee after one of those conversations, they commit to it next time. So we've got to make sure that when people are coming in, they go, I want support. One, we need to agree what that looks like and establish reality. But secondly, we've got to know, we've got to be comfy being uncomfortable, not in the saying it over a coffee, but actually living by that, and have mentors that are 100% committed to help that team or that athlete or that coach or that manager to help them be the best they can be. But no, there's going to be some uncomfortable conversations, and be okay with those uncomfortable conversations because you're doing them for the right reasons.
And I think that's emotional. I think that's common. That is a common thing in coaching, even with co-coaching environments, is that threat of sort of challenging each other because of the everyone. It's quite tribal in terms of your own thing that you're doing. So you end up not wanting to. People don't take that feedback necessarily as they should, and they end up taking it personally when actually it's there to help not just them, but whatever program or coaching environment you're in as well. And that's. I think sometimes we do need to be able to take that step back and take feedback, because if anyone puts their hand up and says that they're the best coach in the world, probably need to actually really look deep at what they're actually doing. Or ask the players.
And I think the other challenge is, Kris, going back to that first question you had, is the biggest challenge is even when you've got a coach that really wants it, you know, and by their behaviors are wanting it, if they're not the head coach, they can really struggle because they're seeing the change that's needed for the team. But their head coach still is the shout, tell, the players can't think, we need to work through this. So they're in a real tough battle then. So what I tend to do is, if it's an assistant coach, even I'd just say, look, is there an opportunity to speak to your head coach just to win their hearts and minds, even if it's not on the training, so they see the value. But it's kind of, can we get the person of influence in the coaching team to buy into this, to support the other coaches? So when we get a head coach that actually says, we're going to hot review after every game. So when I say hot review, what I mean is we set a Teams up or Slack or WhatsApp. And after the game, before people get in the car, they do a verbal voice recording, individual coaches away from each other, of how they were at self, how the other coaches were, and how their team was. And it's all based on behaviors first and success criteria. So that goes in and everyone hears it. And then from that, we have a cold review, which can be the next day when you're not in the emotional state you were, and then they can reflect again. And then we're starting to pick that up. But everyone listens to each other and they start connecting back. So someone might be negative on themselves inaccurately. So you've got others saying, well, actually, I disagree. I think you did really well there. But we build an environment where we're saying, we're interested in the feedback, but it's got to be quantifiable. It can't be, oh, I thought this. Okay, so remind us of success, how we did, what are the suggestions? And have a head coach that's, once they've made a decision, is okay in changing their mind. And I think this is a big barrier for many head coaches and teachers, managers, is a lot of them are so advanced in their thinking. They've done all this think, strategize. They've come up with a conclusion and they just share the conclusion. And coaches do it with players as well. So then everyone's looking at them thinking, I'm disagreeing with that. Well, they're disagreeing it because they have no idea how that coach came to that decision, because they've done all this extra thinking. But if the coach then shared the action review process and go, okay, guys, this is the data I'm working with, this is information, these were the options that I came up with, and these are the variables, and this is how I've come to this decision. Or even next level phenomenal is, let's go through this together. This is all the data. Has anyone got anything else? Let's look at all the options. Okay, so let's look at the influences variables. What are we left with? And let's look at pros and cons, and let's agree together. Head coach still having a final say, but then and we do it with players as well. So then the players go, I understand why we've got to go down this tough route, because they're more involved in that process. But be okay with changing your mind. If you have new data, it's okay to say, actually, I got that wrong. And let me share with you as players why I got that wrong, and quantify it, and not thinking I've got to quantify why I did that decision. And in my head, I'm thinking I got that wrong. So all of these little things, Kris, I think that's when we really build those environments up. So I call it our transition of change. So when I'm going to a place, there's some common things that I've always seen. I've never been to a place where I haven't seen it yet. And then there's the subtlety differences. So I've got to be mindful of winning the hearts and minds and not giving them too much to do initially, but understand when we work on something, just because we've done it for a couple of weeks doesn't mean to say it's embedded yet. We can regress really quickly. So let's spend time putting the support networks in, the hot and the cold reviews, catching up, reflecting, still filming ourselves until we start to embed it and get comfy with it. And then we build on the next element. And I think when we do this with coaches, the coaches connect with, actually, I need to do that with the players as well. I can't cover a bit of content and go, I've seen that. Right, let's put something else in, because we need to embed new skills, new behaviors, new choices. So then the beauty, I think, the principles is everything I'm sharing with the coaches, the principles, the language, the terminology, and the challenges is the same the coaches are asking the players. So it's a common language. But yeah, it is difficult, Kris. There's no question it's critical. And I've had walked away to one full team, and I've walked away to now 4 coaches that, you know, they were saying the words, but they just weren't following the action. So we're kind of wasting our time. You've got to know when to change the coach or change the coach, if that makes sense of the principle.
That's what, and a key thing sort of I've got anyway, but especially for what you're saying there, is change does take time. So
yeah,
if you've listened to this now, and because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people listening that are just going, Mark, you've just blown my mind, because you've certainly blown mine to some extent. And the people are just going to be there, oh, I'm going to try this in my next session, and then they'll do it and it'll go fall on its ass, it won't work, and then they'll go, oh, well, I'll just go back to what I do. Well, actually, you need to go with it. You need to, if you're going on the journey, you need to set yourself a target of how you want to embed it, give yourself sort of targets to work towards, and review them as you go as well. You can't just expect to be there with there. It's all learning's sort of time, and this sort of stuff is new because they're not going to cover it on a standard NGB.
Yeah, and importantly, be explicit when you are going to change. Let everyone of influence know the value of the change, so they're not thinking, what on earth is going on with this crazy individual? They go, I see why you're doing it, and I get it, and actually I really value that you're committing to change, because that's helping us. That's the bit for me, the big one. Be explicit, share it, get everyone to see the value. Remember, you don't have to like something to see the value in it, but again, if you haven't got your lighthouse, where's your point of reference? So we're back to the lighthouse. Okay, so how's it fit? Great. What's my work on? Great. Let's look at it, let's review it, let's reflect, let's share. But make sure people know how to reflect. Give them a framework to self-review, not just go review. And if you listen to a lot of social media, a lot of people are talking about reviewing, but if you listen to most of it, even a lot of the studies that people share, it's all cold review stuff. It's after action. We need people to review in action. We need to build skills so they can actually make great choices in action and reflect live in action, conclude what's next. And that's trainable. We've done it with pre-teens kids, and they've been all over it. I'll give a shout out to Evo Soccer, Evo Rugby in Sheffield. Well, they're globally now, but they're happy for any coach to come up and view them. And you will see kids that you think, oh my God, their behaviors are better than some of the world-class professional teams that you work with of adults, because they've spent time and effort in developing the coaches, and they've used the principles over months and months. Now they're in it for years. And I've taken senior international coaches up there, and I use it for masterclasses so they see it live after some theory. And international and professional coaches have been in tears watching these kids. But the reason they're doing it, because the coaches are recognized we're going to invest, and it's going to be a long road of development. It's not just a quick fix course. And that's the difference.
Yeah, no, I think if that's in Sheffield, that might be worth popping down the road and having a little bit of a look. I think because I think one of the reasons we wanted to sort of cover this as a topic area around learner engagement is that's vital to anything that we do as coaches. If you've not got that buy-in for your participants, then anything you plan, anything you do, it's going to fall on its ass anyway. So you need to make sure that you've got that buy-in from the participants. I suppose the only sort of question I'd sort of throw now is like, is there a difference between all the stuff that you spoke about now? Is there a way that you might tweak it slightly if you're working within an individual sport, for example, rather than a team sport? So we've talked about the one-to-ones within, we've talked about challenge points with recognizing that we might not have scanned. Is there anything that you might do differently if you're just working with an individual athlete?
Yeah, the only subtle difference is let's use golf as an example. So if you've got a client that is literally, a lot of golf coaches like personal trainers are self-employed, they have a client even at pro level. And if they're only ever on their own, then obviously you wouldn't use the rule of three. But generally you have a group of coaches, a group of players at certain ages that do link up on the golf course. So you can still use a rule of three. The action review process still applies. If I give you an example of how you would use, which we haven't covered yet, the covert recall stuff, is imagine now you're a golf coach on a one-to-one. So imagine you've used player first, player last at the end of the last session. You've agreed what they're going to do when they go away, but not wishy-washy agreed, which I'm generalizing, but a lot of coaches do. So what I mean by that is when they come to the session, they bring their diary. Obviously it's on phones now. So what you're saying is to them, says, okay, so imagine you meet them once a week. So we meet on Saturday. So we've just had a session. We've agreed now what your work on is, what you're going to focus on. They've shown us they can do it and self-review it live. And we're just listening and they're verbalizing using the action review process, exactly the same. What am I seeing? What are the options, the variables? What am I going to choose? What club it is? What shot am I going to take? Great. Then you step in, commit to the shot, review. Did I commit as soon as the club's finished movement? Yes. Okay, was it the right execution? Was it the right choice? Bang, separate to conclude. Great. So then if you're working on a subtlety of a movement in the swing, the success criteria reviewing that swing element change as opposed to the big picture. So the coaches listen to that. They've done a few times, happy with the speech, and they're vocalizing out loud. Great. You know what you're going to do. So they get the diary out and you say, okay, so how often are you going to commit to this? And so let's generalize now. Someone might go, 3 times a week. And you go, okay, great. I'll see you next Saturday, 12 o'clock. That is unacceptable. That's what I call wishy-washy. So an example would be, so how often are you going to practice this? 3 times a week, coach. Okay, what day of the week? Let's get it in your diary now. So what day of the week are you going to do that? What time? How long are you going to do it for? How are you going to measure success? So now they get the diary out and they're like, Monday. I can't do it Monday. I've got trombone practice. Not all golfers do trombone practice. I'm just putting that in for an example. Wednesday then, 6 o'clock. I've only got half an hour at 6 because then I've got to get home. So all of a sudden now they're looking at the diary and what they said they can do, they actually can't do. The diary doesn't allow them to do it, or it takes me 40 minutes to get to the golf course. Okay, what can you do? I can do this, this, and this. Okay, let's get in the diary. Let's measure success. Let's agree now. When you get there, just go, right, let's do a WhatsApp where you just go, right, I'm ready. This is what my success is. And at the end of that session, just do a hot review. So just like a verbal in there, bang, and I pick it up as a coach and I'm listening. I'm not there with them. So at least I know they've done it and they're reflected. I can also agree. So how about then you just film a couple of your swings and verbalize it. So, and just send that to me with a hot review so I can support you and go, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I'll see you next Saturday. Now they've walked away and got some real framework. Now they come back in the next Saturday. What we never do is go, okay, so remember we were working on that swing, weren't we? And how are you doing with this swing? And don't forget we did this. None of that. You get in a warm up and then you go, okay, just show me what you've been working on. And you step back and you're watching. So based on what you see, That's going to give you a good indication if you're a good golf coach on have they actually been practicing at the level or not, because there'll be the indicators. You get them to verbalize it out loud. Now imagine now you're seeing there's no way they've practiced that. They're even asking me to a reminder of what we've agreed. So then you go, okay, remind me what we agreed. Now they're like, well, we agree. Okay, so what did you do? What didn't you do? Because I'm seeing something here and you know what I'm thinking. Yeah, no, I didn't do it, coach. Okay, no problem. What prevented you from doing it? I got busy, you know, and then I went out with the lads, you know, on Friday and I had a bit of a hangover on Saturday. I said, hey, no problem. But what we've got to look at here, do we need to now review your goal? Because we're looking at now, you're saying you're choosing other things over your goal that you said you could do. So this isn't a problem. There's two things we need to do, Lo. What we need to do is either change your goal, your target. You said you want to get a county level, for example. And with the hours you're putting in now, you're not going to get to county level. I think we need to adjust it where you can play for the club. Are you happy with that? Oh, no, I'm not happy with that. Okay, so we need to change then your commitment to the goal. But we've got to come up with something, because there's no point in me giving you information. You say you're going to do it and you're not, because you're going to get frustrated. I'm going to get frustrated. So which one's it going to be? So if they go, actually, you're right, I'm not as committed as I thought. Okay, no problem. Let's reassign a goal. Level of commitment, no problem. Let's start again. Or they go, no, I need to change. Okay, so what do you need to change? My commitment. Okay, so let's look at prioritizing that and the time management. So now we're having that conversation. It's a dialogue. We reset it and then we go, okay, let's start again. Now, how many times do you think you need to do that before this golf player goes either, hey, this isn't for me, I wanted to be a pro and I'm never going to commit to it, or they go, actually, thank you, and they start to shift their behavior. Either way, you're a win-win as a golf coach, because you know, actually, let me pass you on to Stevie, novice coach, fine, but actually give me a performance player because you're a leisure player. No problem, I'm cool with that. Or you take them on as a leisure player. So leisure and performance players is a behavior, not an ability. A leisure player is based on your behaviors when no one's watching. Your prehab, your rehab, your conditioning, your nutrition, and your practice. So a novice could be a performance player because they have performance behaviors. They're committing to everything that they need to do to be the best they can be. Or you've got someone that could be phenomenal ability, but actually they're a leisure player because actually they're just doing what they want, not what they need. So that would be it. Does that answer your question, Chris, as a quick fix on an individual example?
Yeah. It sounds like a few rugby players as well that I've come across for individual development, and there's a lot of stuff around that. It is because you find people that, they've got the talent to be able to do it, but they're not willing to put the time in to actually get to that point that they need to be. And it just goes back to what we spoke about earlier around you need to know your players, and that can help. Yeah.
And also, Chris, I mean, if we look at that in rugby as an example, I mean, I've known some at Premiership level when I work with Premiership teams where you've had a player that's made it there because they have so much phenomenal ability, but they're lazy. And I won't say a name of a player, but there was a player that was playing for England and then got dropped because he goes, I'm playing for England, I don't need to work any harder. And he was lazy. Then he got dropped. Then he decided to work harder and he got back in the England team. But we see all the way through that the challenge can be with people that are gifted. Shall we say the gifted word? What we mean by that is either as an age group, they're physically more mature, or their dads work with them and practice in the game a little bit more, and they've just got better skills. So their ability better than the people around them. So they're always going to get picked for the first team. The coach is more outcome led and not behavioral led. So they build habits. Says, look, I'm being picked for the first team. I don't need to put in the effort as Jimmy because I'm always getting picked. So actually what we're doing is we're doing them a disservice at grassroots as a coach with that young kid because we're not developing excellence, doing the best you can with what you have. We're saying, actually, because your ability is better than them, I'm okay with that. And I'll pick you over that person that's doing everything they can to be the best they can be. So what we're doing then is we're developing lazy habits. And those players will either get to a point where luckily they'll make it, but still won't be the best they can be. So they'll never get their potential, or they'll get to a point where now they're competing with players that are putting the time in of equal physicality and skill, and they'll get dropped and we'll lose them out of the game. So this is why at grassroots, it's so important. I'm really passionate about it, is we need to develop effective behaviors first before tech-tac. It's about developing the people, the interpersonal, the skills of the people, committing without fear, effectively decision-making, committing to things you can't yet do, read the game, understand it, have a voice, have an opinion, understand others, accept feedback from others. And a coach cultivating that behavior as you said, transformational personal and interpersonal skills, where they can start using it outside the sport. They're the people that will stay in the sport. They're the people that go, I'm not just going to rugby and I'm stood around listening and I'm getting picked last. Actually, I'm valued here and I'm enjoying it. It's tough and it's engaging and I'm loving it. I'm going to stay in the sport longer. Whether they make it or not, it doesn't matter. But actually, they're engaged because we're helping to engage them. So I think sometimes the kids that have that ability, whether it's genetical or a bit more skill, we do a disservice to them because we let them get away with that just because they're better than the players around them. And when we could do so much better.
I think that's a good way to sort of summarise and conclude everything up, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I mean, I've written loads of notes down here. It's really got me thinking about sort of what I could look to do in some changing some of my stuff. So thanks for coming on and sharing it. It's really appreciated.
Can I do my normal hot reviews I do with everyone?
Yeah.
Living the dream. So Kris first, what's your biggest takeaway from this session?
So what I want to really start doing is thinking about how I do my my own reviews when I'm in with my players. I think there's times where I've been thinking a lot about the type of questioning that I use anyway, because from what you said earlier, players become programmed to the responses that you want. So I need to really think about how I go about doing that and start maybe looking at more of getting them assessing if they scan, do they aware, get them to come up with the answers and then go back rather than feeding them information. I think I've definitely fallen into that trap too much of just providing, when you answer questions, you just get them blank stares of just giving the answers back. And I think that's something that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I've just not really fully been aware of the process of what to do it. And I think this would actually be a great way of starting that process.
Now, to add some texture to that, Kris, is if you, when you do that player first, player last, but say to them, look, whatever you're going to go and do now, you've got to show me. So if you say you're going to do that now, can you do it? Okay, show me, push them out. And all you're doing every time you're scanning for, are they committing to what they said? Now, the outcome doesn't have to be there. We're looking for, are they committing to the words that they've said? Now, if they're not, you can bring them in and you go, okay, remind me what we agreed. Okay, so review that. Are you committing to that or not? Because I don't want you to tell me the answer. I want you to show me. So what we end up doing then, as opposed to players just giving you the answer, then we're moving on to something. If they're telling you what they're going to change, even if we were going to move on to something, we go, okay, let's go back out. Let's show us. And every time someone agrees they're going to do something, we scan, are you actually doing it? And we challenge them if they're not. That in itself is a game changer for so many, because they'll realize I can't just say words now. I've got to be able to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Harrison, for you?
I think it's the empowering of the ninjas, using those, using the extroverts, the dominants, the more dominant characters, getting them kind of almost getting them to feel as if they're the coach. To actually, I think for me that's probably an area, I think, where they can be so much more impactful upon those quieter, more introverted characters to really kind of bring out the solutions and the creative answers that they might have.
Awesome, because remember already they are influencers, but they may be negative influencers as well as positive ones. So that's why that ninja mastery, that's why I call it ninja mastery, because you are an influencer already, but let's build up your mastery to actually be an effective, positive influencer of others, as opposed to just shouting the answer or getting frustrated when people don't do it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's certainly something that I'm going to look to implement, and I'm going to try and stick to it and be resilient and patient.
Awesomeness.
So, Mark, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, guys. Just let me know when it links on my PDS Coach. Everything's PDS Coach now. Twitter, website, PDS Coach.
Yeah, I'll still drop you a message with all the details of when it's going to go. I think it'll be back end of Feb, Harrison. I think.
Yeah. No, start of March.
Early March, yeah. So we did a few recordings yesterday, and then we've got a few more to do as well. Busy time.
Good stuff. Well, thank you.
No, thank you, Mark. Harrison, I think I've got a little bit of a headache after that. Mark's completely blown my mind with a lot of the stuff that we chatted about. It was such an engaging, which I'd expect it was on learner engagement, informative chat.
Oh yeah, it certainly was, and there's and there's so many little bits of nuggets of gold that which you just want to get out on the training pitch and try straight away, and not just on the training pitch, even off field. It's there's little bits of gold in there that are just scattered throughout that last hour that I think will benefit so many coaches, and it's going to benefit my coaching.
That's all I kept thinking about is how could I bring this in to sort of my coaching now, and I think it's going to be really hard. I think you need someone to actually, for the first few weeks, you probably or sessions, you need someone with you if you did want to take that change to go down this way, to keep prodding you and pointing you towards making sure that you stick to it, because I think you can fall into previous habits quite easily. And like Mark said, it's probably going to be messy to start with, but actually in the more long term, you're going to see the benefit from it. And I think that was quite an important bit. Is everything Mark said was brilliant, but the first time you try it, it might be awful. You've got to stick with it though.
Yeah, and it goes back to a common theme throughout all the episodes so far in the season. It's taken us coaches out of our comfort zone, but the whole point of this series of the podcast is coaching skills, and we're all first to admit that the best way to promote skillful rugby players and improve their skills is to put them out of their comfort zone. Now we should be doing the same as coaches, and yes, like you say, it's going to look messy, but referring back to what Mark said in the episode, can we get to that lighthouse? At the start of the season, ask the players, what does perfect look like? And then through all the learner engagement and through all the sessions that we've planned, on topics we touched with Tony and the stuff we touched with Jay and Dan so far, right, how do they all link together so we can get that perfect picture out on the pitch, either on training or in the match day as that lighthouse? And I think that was quite profound for me.
I agree, because and this thing that you could plan the most brilliant session down on paper for an activity structure perspective, which everything that we spoke about with Dan and Jay included. But if you're not engaging the players within that through different ways of ensuring that they're learning, then the activity structure is going to fall apart anyway. And learner engagement, I think, is the most important part of that piece of the puzzle, really. And you can do that through just the different ways of questioning and engaging and getting them to reflect, to challenge the players differently.
Yeah, and he summarised that quite nicely with the three kind of environments that we want to create, either within a session or for the whole session. With either a learning part or a learning session, a performance session, or a competitive session, and where as coaches, our coaching behaviours will act differently across those three different environments to see what the engagement is across the learners. And what kind of really massively stood out was we can go to the competitive environment, but you can't go to the competitive environment if you've not gone through the learning and the performance environment, because the players won't necessarily have the right answers and the right solutions for the problems that they might face.
So I think learning doesn't just happen overnight. So just because you've done that one session, you've got to come back and revisit it, don't you? It's not going to be embedded, and you're not going to be able to. And then the key thing for that, I think, from what we touched on with Mark, is the type of questioning that you use within that to check for that understanding. And I know we're going to be chatting about communication and questioning later on in the series, but that for me is quite a really important area, because players, I find even now, and that's when I've realised that I've come probably a bit stale in certain areas, of get predicted for the answers that you want. But actually what Mark is getting you to do is actually, rather than give them an answer, is what options were available. What options did you see? And getting them to talk about the different situations that they had, and then relate that back to the objectives that they've set themselves and whether they committed to them. Did you commit to that? No, might go back and do it again. And I also like the bit that he said within his first session, they did as like his baseline bit, where he just got them into teams and got them to do like a SWOT analysis of what their strengths, the opposition's weaknesses, and what opportunities they had to be able to beat them. Because that's another thing from in a game sports, team sports perspective, is you've got to work as a group to work out what the weaknesses are, to use the tools in your locker to beat them. So it's just getting them to think differently than, this is what we need to go through as a process to beat these. Well, actually, what are their weaknesses, and how can we use the tools that we've got to beat them?
I think, and what kind of sprung to my mind during that would be what an ideal game that would be for us, like a start of a pre-season. You say if you've got a new group of players, that haven't really seen each other, right? If they can pick out the strengths and weaknesses of their own kind of teammates who are opposite them in a game and training, now surely that just means that, right, when we get playing together as a cohesive unit, right, I already know his strengths and weaknesses because from day one we were told to analyze and and keep an eye on what they were doing as a team. So once again you're bringing in that engagement, and and building on that, he talks around his ninjas, his influences, and how they can almost impact learning as well. The kids are probably, or the adults are probably a little bit more outspoken. They're probably a little bit more brash, a little bit more extroverted. Right? How can we use them to try and kind of promote the ideals that we want out of our sessions and the positive behaviours that we're looking to seek, and actually empower the players who are actually probably a little bit quieter.
Definitely, and that is such an easy bit of just because I'm also I did a lot of work when I was at the RFU within schools, and now I know that if I was going in and doing some tag rugby, there's actually probably a 9-year-old that can explain to another 9-year-old better than I can at 34. I just think they just communicate more effectively with each other, and if you've got someone that's got it and knows what you need to do, it's a lot easier for them to try and explain it than me talk about a complex sport and make it more complicated for them.
Yeah, well, obviously, Chris, you just don't have that experience of talking to 9-year-olds. No. And if you did, it would be very odd. And you're totally right. And even I see it now, and I'm 26 and I'm coaching 18-year-olds, but there's a generational gap there in which the language in terms of how they speak to each other on a colloquial or on a social basis is just totally different. Now, how more impactful would that be if that came from another player who spoke in, well, you talk at layman's terms, but spoke to them as if they were, having a chat down the park? No, that's going to be so much more profound for a player than me, and especially with the way that rugby's going, and not just rugby, lots of sports, and sporting jargon is a phrase that probably people have come across. The kind of keywords that only if you're only kind of massively competent in the sport, that you'd know all the jargon to it. And it's different in every environment. But right, if you can get the students or the players who understand the environment, understand their players, probably on a better level than what we do as coaches, to help deliver key messages, then so much more profound.
Yeah, another fascinating one that I think is probably worth listening to again, just to make sure that you're fully taking in everything that Mark had to say, because I think there's that many bits of golden nugget information within that I don't think one listen does it justice.
No, and like I'm sat here talking to you and reflecting on the episode, and I've got pages of notes, and I don't even think that we've probably scratched the surface of everything in this reflection here. So, yeah,
I might go and listen to it again right now on the drive home.
Do it.
Guys, thank you. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Leave some comments, let us know what you think. Charlie's got all of our social media details at the end, and we will see you next time.
Cheers for listening. Don't forget to join in the discussion at Big Breakdown HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.